G'day everyone, I am the man called Kemosabe, the man with a plan from the land down under, and this is my review of T-Bird and Throttle. I purchased the digital copies of issues 0 through 3 in a bundle. This book was fulfilled via the Indiegogo platform. The campaign for issue 4 begins at the end of this week, and I hope my review will prompt many people to take a deeper look at this very well made, very worthwhile comic. As usual, I'll review the cover, the content of the book, and then talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of this comic. I've only recently gotten on Twitter. I'm not sure how I first saw this comic. I missed out backing it the first time, and then during subsequent campaigns I wasn't in the kind of fiscal situation where I could buy in. I was reminded by a tweet recently, but couldn't find an active campaign anywhere. I contacted Josh Howard, the writer and artist, asking him if I could purchase digital copies of the books. He got back to me within 24 hours, offering me all 4 issues of the book, issues 0 through to 3, for $25 US. The books were well worth the price. This is one of the best crowd-funded books I've read. If you've watched my other videos, you've probably heard me lament the lack of deep lore, reliability, and the over-reliance on long backstories and flashbacks in crowd-funded books. Similarly, I've disliked the abandonment of continuity and the ignoring of established characters and character traits in mainstream comics. T-Bird and Throttle addresses all these issues effectively, creating a narrative I want to read, building, over a mere 4 issues, a world I want to know more about. The cover's job is to make the reader want to purchase the book. There are a couple of ways to do this. You showcase amazing art with the promise that the interior art is of the same high quality. You showcase interesting characters, or you can have the cover hint at some event or conflict detail within the book that the customer just has to read. DC was great at this sort of thing in the Silver Age, where the characters would hint at the outlandish conundrums on the cover, enticing users to purchase the book. I'm sure most of you have seen this classic. The blurbs on Superman comics at the time were even more outrageous. I look at the covers for T-Bird and Throttle issues 0 and issue 1. The covers for issues 2 and 3 both reveal story elements I don't want to spoil. This book is so good I would rather people buy it and read it themselves. Issue 0 has the very stock standard, heroes posing in an introductory flash of energy. These kinds of covers get a pass. Most issue 0, issue 1 covers fit this category because the cover is a vehicle to showcase the new character or characters. It hints at some element, visual or thematic, that is meant to make the character and therefore the book appealing to potential customers. The clever thing about this is the cover of issue 0, which has a classic boom hero the new heroes type pose, is actually the art for a comic book being read by a character within this book itself. The art is copied exactly but given a retro dot print pattern. This is a nice touch that immediately makes a link between your experience as a real world reader consuming a comic book and the characters in the book reading a comic in their world. The events of the comics in our world aren't real, so are the events in the comic being read by a character in their fictional world also fiction? It's kind of meta and it drew me in from page 1. The cover of issue 1 is a great example of a cover that does its job. Everything about this cover is designed to draw the reader in, especially in contrast to the cover of issue 0. Aside from questionable links to a very famous cover, this image draws in the reader. It mirrors last issue's classic hero splash page but covers it in accusatorial graffiti. It tears parts away. It's adhered to a grimy brick wall with its own graffiti. It's not until I read a few issues that I realised none of the graffiti was random or happenstance. It's all linked to events and concepts within the comic. The body language of the two characters is clear. There is a rift between them. The girl is turning away from the man. Her face speaks of hurt, betrayal and disappointment. At first I thought she was the woman in the poster with a haircut and a dye job, but it is revealed to be the main character's daughter. He is looking sideways at her, seeking her forgiveness, her acknowledgement and approval, but not willing to face her and perhaps not willing to face whatever hurt he has caused her. He is a dishevelled version of the image behind him. Heavy stubble, grey hair, his face lined with grief or worry. This is a masterful cover that conveys so much with just 2 static figures standing near a brick wall. This cover told me Josh Howard is a storyteller, one who knows what he is doing. I'll just be reviewing the content of issue 1 in this video. If you want to see more, I encourage you to go back to the campaign at the end of this week. I have no doubt a 5-pack will be made available for new backers. The story starts with a very pared-back recount of T-Bird's origin, with similarities to All-Star Superman's opening pages. It mentions the way great stories are told and retold, and while the coat of paint on the outside changes, the meaning within doesn't. There are some great discussions out there online about how myths of Superman and Hercules have parallels with the stories of Moses and, to a lesser extent, Jesus Christ. The idea that these original stories are seated so deeply in the collective consciousness and are so familiar to us that they are retold over and over again. We see Mitch Maddox, astronaut, gaining powers while in space, and parallels to Flash Gordon, Ultraman and the Fantastic Four are apt. I think with all the privately funded travel back into space, we're due for a new crop of space-themed and space-powered heroes. They kind of died off as space exploration became less hands-on and became passed off to rovers and satellites over the last few decades. Mitch is brought out of his reverie by his daughter, who wants to be a superhero like her dad. We see the perfect happy family, and then it's shattered, and we see Mitch broken, older, grieving, and contemplating suicide. The story jumps to the now. Mitch is older but in better shape. He's dropping his daughter off for her first day at a public high school. He shows that he is an attendant, caring father, if a little anxious, before he drives into the city to attend a Comic-Con. The city he drives into, Centennial City, is the archetypical city of tomorrow we've seen in many classic tales. Mitch is stuck at a booth between the restrooms and can't even draw a single fan. He laments the number of times he saved the city from threats, but no one remembers him or his great feats. He is being ignored for the newer, flashier heroes. There's an interesting bit of world building here where Mitch comments on how the pictured hero, Superior Justice, was an identity used for years by public servants, war heroes, and even a former president of the United States. But in today's society, the costume is given to a popular internet personality who is not at all qualified to be a hero. Mitch's agent reminds him that most heroes these days are just for show, relying on gadgets and devices to simulate powers, and that they are glorified meter maids and Hollywood wannabes. A woman approaches Mitch's table and he hopes she's after an autograph, but she's delivering a letter from Starlink, the company Mitch was working for when he gained his powers. He gets very angry and says he wants nothing to do with Starlink. This is a well-written way to hint at a larger, life-changing event that occurred in the past without huge blocks of exposition or that kind of dialogue where characters explain stuff to each other, stuff they already know for the benefit of the reader. We jump back in time to the mission where Mitch gained his powers for a 2-page flashback. It shows his teammates and hints at their personalities and relationships to one another, letting us see what kind of people they are in just a single page. The female astronaut, Lieutenant Shan, claims that she can't take time off to watch an MMA fight because she plans to be the captain by the time she's 30. She jokes with the guys and keeps up with them verbally, but she eschews spending time with them socially. She is driven, she has a plan and a goal. That's enough of a snapshot to guess how she will react in a range of situations. Without flanderizing your characters, you should, as a creator, definitely try to give readers an immediate snapshot of who they are and what matters to them. Put them in a situation that matters to them. Have them act or react, even if it's just verbally or emotionally, to a situation or obstacle so we can see what they're made from. In one page, Josh Howard has managed to convey 3 distinct personalities, establish a strong and casual friendship between Mitch and Stokes, and we know that while the female astronaut respects Mitch, she kind of sees him as competition. She sees him as having what she wants, the rank of captain and command of his own ship. The ship is hit by a meteor and they are forced to land. Stokes predicts the ship's trajectory will land them in a particular area of the moon, and Mitch growls, "Moon Men." This is a great cliffhanger. We don't know the purpose of the mission. We don't know what the Moon Men are, but it doesn't look to be a good thing. We can guess they are aliens and they are malevolent, which expands the world vastly. We now believe or suspect that aliens are real and exist in this world. In a single panel, in 2 words, Josh Howard has opened up whole realms of possibility in the mythos of his creation. We return to the present where Emily is being ostracized by the school community. No one will let her sit with them, not even Daphne and Velma, those stuck-up bitches. The way people are death-staring her, you get the feeling it's more than just the fact she's the new girl at school. Something about her has the rest of the students very angry at her. There's almost a sort of pod people feel to these panels. Back at the Comic-Con, Mitch takes a break and finds copies of the comic his daughter was reading at the start of the book in the bargain bin. And then he comes across another comic, this one promising to tell the real story of his fall from grace. He reads it and becomes furious. He barges into the Starlink offices and confronts the president, accusing him of being involved in the production of the comic. Mitch's reasoning is that there are details in the comic only him and Starlink personnel could know. Unhappy with the president's response, Mitch moves to leave when he is informed another engine, just like the one embedded in his chest, has been detected on the moon, and the Lunarians have possession of it. Mitch's face, the concern, the worry, the disbelief and fear says it all. We're left with another cliffhanger. What are the Lunarians? We can assume they're the same as the Moon Men Mitch was worried about during the last flashback. In the past, we see the astronauts follow the energy signature of what they thought was a meteor, which instead turns out to be some sort of spacecraft. They get closer and we recognise it as the engine in Mitch's chest, the source of his powers. Mitch is suddenly shot and killed by the Lunarians. Shan and Stokes are about to die when the engine merges with Mitch and apparently takes control of him, killing the Lunarians before collapsing in the moon dust. Straker, the president of Starlink, convinces Mitch that they need him to lead a covert mission to retrieve the new engine from the hands of the Lunarians, promising him employment, reinstatement as a real superhero, and by extension, redemption as a reward. In the next scene, Mitch's agent tries to convince him not to do it. If he dies on the mission, Emily will be left without any parents. Mitch gets angry and pushes back against the idea that Emily isn't the most important thing to him, and just then he realises that he's late to pick her up from school. He arrives at her school and she is angry, refusing to talk to him. She locks herself in a room, and when Mitch wants to know why she is so mad, she shows him a copy of the comic. This is some great writing. Just as Mitch is hit with his irrelevance, the very corporation he blames for his problems suddenly needs him and promises him a magic wand to fix just about everything that's wrong in his life. Mitch is unsure about it, but then the one good thing he has in his life, his daughter, turns on him, and he feels like to earn back her trust and her love, he will have to do this mission. This is some Pixar-level plotting. All these elements converge at once to create a moment where Mitch does something he would never normally do. I can only hope to be able to plan my writing to work as smoothly as this. Feeling down, Mitch goes to a bar where everyone seems to know his name. The recent activity by the Moonmen is in the news cycles, and combined with the slanderous comic book, Mitch is more recognisable than he has been for some time. He is ejected from the bar by an angry crowd. Some in the crowd aren't satisfied with that and take the hatred to a new level: violence. Attacked from behind, Mitch is beaten with a lead pipe. His attackers say they think his powers aren't working anymore, and as Mitch reaches for the gun he's carrying, it appears they must be correct. Mitch has a flashback to the death and pain his powers has caused in the past. It's vague enough that we have to wonder, has he lost his powers, or is he just refusing to use his powers? We don't find out because just then a police officer turns up and the attackers run off. Mitch recognises the cop. It's Throttle, his former partner and sidekick. She helps him to his feet and the camera zooms into the comic left on the ground, the one that details Mitch's fall from grace. It mirrors the events of issue 0, adding some details and omitting others, but this book has a distinct slant, one that paints Mitch as a bloodthirsty thug who enjoys killing moonmen, who are portrayed as wide-eyed innocents. As the book ends, warning readers to be aware of the threat T-Bird poses, the camera zooms out and we see a skeletal figure alter the graffiti on the wall, the same wall as on the cover of the comic. He changes it from gruesome was here to gruesome is here, and he does it in Mitch's own blood. The first issue ends and we have been introduced to a major character and a major threat. This is the crowdfunded book I've wanted, the one I've been looking for. I don't know if the Jawbreakers model works for me, releases once a year like an MCU movie, updating the overall story, but each graphic novel is really a snapshot of a single day or event in the characters' lives. It's a model I'll be following myself with my own books, more out of necessity than anything else. But I've talked often about my desires for a serialised, continuity-heavy, ongoing series, and this is it. In 2 years, Josh Howard has produced 4 issues of his comic, and another is on the way at the end of this week. The production values on this book is fantastic. The art is obviously heavily influenced and visually similar to the animated style pioneered by Bruce Timm. There's also some crossover with Michael A. Von Oeming, whose work I first saw on Powers. That's not to say Josh Howard's style is derivative, it's just that it shares some of the same visual syntax as those styles. The art is easy to follow, the action flows, and everyone is instantly recognisable. The art lends itself to a clean, high contrast and colourful style that is engaging and pleasant to the eye. Far from the pages of drab tans and greys and muted primary colours we see in modern books, the colouring is bold but simple, using 3 or 4 layers of separation and tone. The story is instantly engaging. Nothing is wasted, no panel, no line, no page. Every character matters, every line is deliberate and builds on the story. There's no scenes of people sitting and eating cake and drinking coffee while emotionally validating each other. Everything about this world seems to want to line up to kick Mitch's ass. He can't catch a break, and despite his role as protagonist and ostensibly a hero, there is a very cleverly underlying element that suggests maybe he's not completely blameless. Maybe his situation is at least partially his own fault. I've never struggled so hard to come up with something for this category. There's just so little to complain about here. In fact, most of my criticisms will simply come down to this thing was done well, but theoretically it could have been done better, which could probably be applied to every comic ever made. It could probably be applied to every piece of media ever made, with the exception of Roadhouse, which is of course literal perfection. Are there a few panels here and there that could have been a little tighter? Sure, it happens in most comics. Were there times where the sentimental theme was kind of forced through the page where it was laid out a little too fast? Maybe once or twice, but that's a consequence of the medium and trying to make the most of the page real estate. If we can accept themes and sentiments that only just fit into 20-minute episodes of Rick and Morty, we can accept themes that fit tightly into a 60-page comic. In the overwhelming majority of cases, Josh Howard has masterfully crafted a fusion between art and story to create a complete, engaging, original comic book, something more people than ever are trying to achieve these days, but not everybody is able to attain. This book circumvents my main problem with many crowdfunded books, the flashbacks. Many crowdfunded books dedicate a large percentage of the page real estate to laborious drawn-out flashbacks, often to the detriment of the now story. 17 of the 53 pages are dedicated to flashbacks in this book, so it's a little over a quarter of the total page count. But these flashbacks are spliced between lengthy scenes of right now, of what's currently happening in the story. Impressively, in a style that mirrors the CW Arrow show, at least the early seasons, each flashback in this book is in some way relevant to the scene that came before it. We see T-Bird receive a summons from Starlink, his former employer, one that he refuses, one that makes him very angry. We then get a flashback about part of his mission, and you see some of why Mitch hates Starlink and doesn't want to work with them. This is, in my opinion, the very best way to do flashbacks in a comic. Yes, there'll be exceptions depending on your story and the effect you want and the format you're working in, but I maintain that as a broad statement that ignores outliers, this method is a superior way of informing readers of historical information they need, information that enhances the story without resorting to huge flashbacks of Batman Begins-like structure, where the first half of the story is your flashback. Events are shown chronologically, but you're paid to see Batman, and you don't see Batman for something like the first hour of the movie. I suppose you can almost draw comparisons to G.R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire books, where many characters who have a narrative voice appear in alternating chapters. How often, while reading those, have you read to the end of a chapter and then been disappointed when it switched to a new character's perspective? And then you become engrossed in that character's story and become disappointed when the narrative focus switches again. I feel this way about the first few seasons of the Arrow TV show. It would jump back to the past, but I wanted more of the now. Then I'd become so interested in the events of the past I could see how they were influential to the now, and I wanted to know more. I wanted to know how and why Oliver survived the island. Just as I felt we're about to get some more answers from the past, the narrative jumps back to the present, a constant cycle of action, trickle-fed information and cliffhangers. If you can master this structure, you've got a winner. Josh Howard handles this structure very well, and I was engrossed in both the past and present storylines. In the present, people refer to events that you don't yet know about. They hint at things they know, for having lived in the world, but as mere observers, we don't have the specifics, so we can only guess if people's hatred of Mitch is justified, if Spacelink is as evil as he makes out. We don't know if Mitch has lost his powers or if it's just his nerve. The way the flashbacks are seeded between scenes of current events is impressive, and makes for a smooth read that constantly gives the reader more pertinent information to build their understanding of events and fill gaps in the narrative. It's a slow burn effect, and it's eminently effective. Every event in the first issue links to events in issues 2 and 3. The Zero issue gives you a version of events that colours your perception of the whole series, and then, at the culmination of the story, you see the whole truth and realise how well planned this story was, how committed Josh Howard was to this long-form storytelling. While each issue is enjoyable, when viewed as a whole story, each issue elevates the others, and you get a complete story that will leave you feeling and thinking for some time afterwards. This book isn't just colourful, well-drawn and fun, it's engaging and thought-provoking, and in its own way, even a little haunting. I held Perfect 10 up as an example of a really great crowdfunded book, and I'll add T-Bird and Throttle to that list. In fact, this book is even more sophisticated and well-structured, even just comparing the first issues of both titles. If you're someone who aims to crowdfund a book or wants to create comics in general, pick yourself up a copy of these series, all 5 issues if you can, for a masterclass in pacing, world-building, character development, plotting and production values. T-Bird and Throttle is the reason crowdfunding platforms exist, to give life to brilliant products that enrich people's lives, in this case by providing a high-quality bit of escapism. I haven't heard much from and about the creator, but if you pitch this book to Image or some other company and they knocked it back, they've got rocks in their head. This is a sleeper hit. If it was on comic book shelves and getting the benefit of a marketing campaign, you'd own copies of it already. If you want to know what comics need to look like to survive and thrive in the future of this industry, you're looking at it.